A soft whisper. It danced on the edge of sleep. Sarah stirred. Her heart pounded in her chest. She opened her eyes. The room was dark. The only light came from the moon outside her window. She listened intently. Another whisper. It seemed to come from the foot of her bed. "Come closer," it hissed. Sarah sat up in bed. Her breath caught in her throat. She listened. Silence. The whispers were gone. She told herself it was just a dream, just the wind. Sarah took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing pulse. She lived alone. There shouldn't be anyone else in her apartment. She pulled the covers up to her chin. Her eyes darted around the room. Shadows danced in the corners. Each one seemed to writhe and twist. The darkness felt heavy, suffocating. A knot of fear tightened in her stomach. She closed her eyes, willing herself to relax. It was just her imagination. There was nothing to be afraid of. She was safe in her own home. But deep down, a primal fear whispered. Something was wrong. Very wrong. She tried to ignore the feeling. She tried to go back to sleep, but the whispers started again, louder this time, more insistent. "Come closer," they urged. "Don't be afraid." Sarah fumbled for the lamp on her nightstand. Her hand trembled. She knocked it over. It clattered to the floor. The sudden noise startled her. She jumped. Her heart pounded in her ears. She scrambled out of bed and stumbled to the wall. She flicked on the light switch. The sudden brightness made her squint. The shadows in the corners seemed to retreat, but the feeling of unease remained. She was alone. The room was empty. There was no one there. But the whispers, she had heard them. She knew she had. Sarah took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. It was probably just the building settling. Old houses made noises. It didn't mean anything was wrong. But the whispers continued. They seemed to be everywhere, surrounding her, closing in. "Don't be afraid," they coaxed. "We just want to talk." Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Sarah hesitated. She didn't want to look. What if it was... No, she shook her head. It was probably just a wrong number, or a spam message. She glanced at the screen. Her blood ran cold. A message flashed across the screen. "We're already in the room." It wasn't a wrong number, and it definitely wasn't spam. Terror surged through her. She fumbled with the phone, dropping it on the floor. The whispers grew louder. They seemed to be coming from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. She couldn't escape them. She backed away from the nightstand, her eyes wide with fear. The room was spinning. She couldn't breathe. She pressed her back against the wall, her heart pounding in her chest. The whispers seemed to be closing in on her, swirling around her like a whirlpool. She glanced at her phone on the floor. She needed to call for help. She needed to get out of here. But what if they stopped her? What if they were already at the door? Her hand shook as she reached for her phone. She managed to pick it up and dial 911. But before she could press the call button, the phone slipped from her grasp and clattered to the floor. She stared at it, her heart pounding in her ears. She was trapped. The whispers intensified, pressing in on her, suffocating her. She covered her ears with her hands, trying to block them out, but it was no use. The voices seemed to be inside her head now, whispering her name, taunting her. She felt a cold breath on the back of her neck. It sent shivers down her spine. She whirled around, her eyes searching the darkness. For a moment, she thought she saw a figure standing in the corner. It was tall and shadowy, its features indistinct. But when she blinked, it was gone. The whispers seemed to be coming from the corner now, where the figure had been standing. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. She was paralyzed with fear. The whispers stopped. Silence descended upon the room. It was a heavy, suffocating silence. Sarah held her breath, her eyes darting around the room, searching for any sign of movement. Then, a voice cut through the silence. It was low and cold, sending chills down her spine. "It's too late to run," it said. Sarah's eyes widened in terror. She turned towards the voice. Her blood turned to ice. Standing in front of her, staring back at her from the mirror, was a shadowy figure. Its eyes glowed red in the darkness. The lights flickered, and then everything went dark.